Okay, well, let's get started because we have such two really interesting panelists today, and I want to make sure we have time for both their presentations and questions. For those of you that are just logging on now, I'm Eleanor College. I'm a family physician. I work in Toronto, and I'm also the CPD program director for the Department of Family and Community Medicine in Toronto. And today's session, which is part of the First 5 Years series, Community of Practice, we've got two topics coming up. First of all, Caring Without Compromise, which is about mastering boundaries in healthcare, and then Beyond the AI Scribe, like tools to address forms, referrals, and inbox management. If I could go to the next slide, Peter. So we just wanted to start with a land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Next slide, please. So just a reminder about the First 5 Years community practice. Basically, it's designed for those of you in your first 5 years. We love to get your suggestions in terms of topics, what you want to learn about. We try to make our sessions highly practical. We do like to have snack pairings to encourage people to really enjoy themselves while they're watching. Today's snack pairing is gourmet popcorn. And also a reminder that our sessions are accredited, so you can get main pro credits for them. And that's sent out to you in the evaluation, an email that you receive after the session. Usually I have a partner in crime, Dr. Ryan Bannock, but he's not able to be here today, but he will be back for our next session in May. And next slide, please. So just in terms of our disclosure of financial support and mitigating potential bias, it's outlined here. Next slide, please. And I'm now just going to get each of the panelists to introduce themselves and speak to any conflicts of interest that might have. So starting with Dr. Joan Chan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joan. I practice in Guelph, and I don't have any conflicts of interest with this talk.
Hi everyone, I'm AJ, Dr. Kadhim. I'm a practicing family doctor in Toronto, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Pippen AI, which is one of the AI scribes that are available now. I'll talk about how I mitigate my risk during the talk as well.
Thank you both. Next slide, please. So just in terms of my own disclosures, I do get some honoraria from the Ontario College of Family Physicians, as well as for some work that I do with the Foundation for Medical Practice at McMaster, but I don't think either of these are going to pose a conflict of interest for today's talk. And next slide, please. Just a reminder that if you want to ask any questions, please do post them in the Q&A section, and then we'll get to them at the end of the talk. And if you see a question that's already there that you would like answered, then you can always upvote it rather than writing it twice, and that way I know which ones to prioritize. And then also, if you want to share any resources with other people on the chat, that's going to be really helpful, and just post all that kind of stuff into the chat rather than into the Q&A. Next slide, please. Great. I think with that, we're going to turn things over to Dr. Chan.
Thanks, Dr. College. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having me here this evening. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about boundaries, which is, I don't think it's anyone's favorite topic, and it is one of my favorite topics to talk about because when you have a deeper understanding of how boundaries function, the benefit they can have to your life, they can make the practice of medicine much more enjoyable. Next slide, please. So something I invite you all to reflect on, and if you're comfortable as I'm speaking, I would love to hear in the chat, like if you can write in the chat, what makes boundary setting difficult for you in relationship to patients or colleagues or the system. Yeah, I would love to hear from any of you who wish to share what your struggles with boundaries are, and then I can make sure that I cover them in my presentation. Next slide, please. So the main issue that I think comes up for us in terms of boundaries, because like you hear that term a lot, and you can almost get like some shame about it, be like, oh, I'm just so bad at setting boundaries, as if it's like a character flaw. But really, when we're born, we all have a very natural and strong ability to develop boundaries over time, depending on our family of origin. But we are born with an innate sense of what we like and don't like. And, as babies, we're actually quite good at expressing what we like or don't like. Like if you've ever met a baby, they will let you know yes or no about whatever's going on in the situation. So the trouble comes as we grow up, as we get conditioned within the school system, and certainly as we go through our medical training and become adults, we get socially and emotionally conditioned to believe in human stories about ourselves as well as our patients that make it a whole lot trickier to set boundaries. A lot of the stories that we're told are sort of true that we need to uphold actually make boundaries pretty much impossible. And I'm going to give you some examples on the next slide, please. So some common in human stories that you may recognize are notions like, I have to stay professional at all times. A big one that ends up violating our boundaries, where we violate our own boundaries, is my patient's needs take priority over my own. Aren't I not going to be an altruistic, helpful doctor if I don't say yes to everything my patients say? Another tricky one when it comes to setting boundaries is the one next to it. I'm only a good doctor if my patients like me. I don't know if that resonates for anyone else, but it definitely was a core belief I tried to uphold for as long as I could when I started practicing over 10 years ago. A couple others. So one is I need to do everything perfectly, otherwise bad things will happen. So the kind of perfectionism that runs through many of us, that when we apply it to the messy art of an application of medicine, can be really tricky. And the notion that I have to know all the answers. So I don't know if any of those in human stories resonate with you, but a lot of these stories, when I tried to play them out and uphold them in my life, it made setting boundaries pretty much impossible. And actually reclaiming these as in human stories and understanding that really as a human being, there's more realistic stories we can be telling ourselves and embodying in our work is worthwhile. So next slide, please. So when it comes to what we're even talking about when we're talking about boundaries, I want you to picture it's you and a patient sitting in the room. So here we are on the right side. We're the ones with the stethoscopes, not usually white coats anymore, but just to illustrate. And way over there on the other side of the room, there's a patient. And often what gets in the way of boundaries is when we think that things outside of our direct control, and therefore outside of our direct responsibility, are under our control and our responsibility. Next slide, please. So just to very explicitly illustrate, the only things within your control, therefore, the only things that are your responsibility to protect and uphold and take accountability for are your own thoughts, your own emotions, and your own actions. Everything outside of it, and actually you can flip to the next slide for that, please. Outside of your control are the rest of the things on this slide. So first of all, your patient's thoughts are completely outside your control. Your patient's emotions, completely outside your control. Your patient's actions, completely outside of your control, and therefore outside of the locus of your responsibility as well. In addition, other things that are outside of your control, the system, the healthcare system, absolutely. No one here is in control of the healthcare system, or else you'd be doing a much more bang up job than what's happening in our system now, right? Science as a whole is outside of our individual controls. The science shows what it shows. And just society and the different factors of what's going on, all of that is outside of our control, but can make setting boundaries feel more complicated when we think we have some sort of responsibility or ownership over them. Excuse me, next slide, please. So really, when we think about what it is that we have to focus on, if we focus on checking the thoughts that we have about ourselves, checking the stories we're telling ourselves, finding ways to process and take responsibility for our own emotions, and allowing them all to be felt because they're all safe to feel, and taking responsibilities for our own actions, that's what we end up contributing to the co-creation of whatever it is that we make with our patients. And so the yellow line around this is, you could say, that's us setting that boundary, and inside of that, taking radical responsibility for what is ours and releasing the rest. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give an example of what this looks like in practice. So reason for visit on your schedule says wants MRI of back. This is a scenario that potentially for some of you, depending on if you were socialized like me, could bring up a lot of inhuman stories. So next slide, please. We'll just illustrate what some of those might be. So what are some of the thoughts that might run through my head when I'm, thinking in my socially conditioned way? Oh, I hate telling people no. He's going to be mad at me. If I say yes, then I'm draining the healthcare system of resources. If I say yes, then I'm being a doormat. If I say yes, I'm going to fail the choosing wisely report card that no one actually ever gives us, but we feel inside of ourselves guilty if we say yes to an MRI. But if I say no, he's going to be mad at me. If I say no and he secretly has cancer, he's going to sue me or complain about me to the college. Patients like him make my job impossible. I can't win. Entitled and demanding patients are ruining healthcare. So I don't know if you've ever had any of those thoughts, but I certainly have. And so from those stories, so if those are the stories that are running my actions, what kind of emotions are coming up for me? Guilt, shame, anxiety, fear, resentment, frustration, right? All of these are valid emotions to have, especially when we are believing these sorts of stories, like I can't say yes and I can't say no. Gosh, that's a tricky place to find ourselves, right? And what actions result when we're acting out from these stories, though? We end up interrupting our patients, perhaps over-explaining them. We may feel pressured into saying yes, an inauthentic yes, even though we don't really have one. And that, in a way, would be a violation of a boundary where we're saying, we're violating our own internal boundary of like, I don't think an MRI is indicated, but I feel pressure, so I'm going to order one anyway. And not really even listening to the patient. So listening while composing my defense. So these are the sorts of things that happen naturally, especially when we're rushed and we're busy and we're feeling a lot of pressure. So if you recognize yourself in this, you're not alone. That means you're a human being. And what if there was another way to approach the same encounter that felt more authentic to us and in which we could hold boundaries closer? Next slide, please. So that's us over here. And now we can get curious about what's going on in the rest of this picture, right? Like what else is happening in this room that makes it so hard for us to say, just clarify whether it's a yes or a no, right? So one thing we could get curious about is what is the patient thinking? Why have they actually come in to request an MRI? All we have is that the subject says wants MRI. So like, what's the reason behind it? What could they be feeling? If they come in and they're like, listen, I'm not leaving this room unless you give me an MRI. We could stay curious and connected to ourselves and connected to the patient and saying, why is he coming in hot? What could be some of his motivations for asking for what he's asking? We can do that a lot clearer if we understand that ultimately we are in control of saying yes or no, and that no matter what he feels about it, we can still say an authentic yes or no either way. We also can acknowledge everything that makes this tricky for both ourselves and the patient. So all of these blockades in the middle of the screen here, right? So what makes it hard? What makes a request for an MRI hard? Well, our healthcare system does not have enough money. MRI waits are hugely long and MRIs are expensive and we don't have enough money for anything, right? If we were in a different system where MRIs were cheap, easily found, and the science showed that they could be helpful, we wouldn't be having these pressures, right? So there's additional pressures that being in the particular system we're in, under this particular scientific moment we're in, there might be a future moment where like MRIs are like a joke and a thing of the past and we just like blink our hologram at the person and we know what's happening, right? But like that's not the moment we're in now. And just acknowledging that all of that makes these conversations harder, it's useful both for us and even out loud for our patients. Next slide, please. So then acknowledging all those other pieces, what do we want to tell ourselves instead to make it easier to make like just a clear boundary either way, right? So some thoughts that really help me to get into a place where I can make a grounded decision, yes or no, about a particular request. I'm not here to fix anyone. I'm here to understand and connect. Really asking myself the question, what would I need to know to decide if an MRI makes sense for this person? Really validating for myself that this decision can be tricky given all the different factors. There actually isn't like a cut and dry right or wrong answer to these things. And so it's okay if it feels complicated and it's okay that I might choose something that my colleague didn't, and getting curious. What is the need he is expressing underneath this request? So he's coming in hot saying, hey, I need this MRI, but really getting curious about why. Is there a way that I can connect with him so that no matter if I say yes or no at the end, he still feels heard, right? Sometimes we think our boundaries have to be this brittle, like upfront thing, but often boundaries are easier to set if we've actually understood the context of the conversation first. So out of those stories, we end up feeling more curious, compassionate, connected with ourselves and with them. And from there, we more easily listen to actually understand and connect with the patient, make a decision whether we're ordering the MRI or not, and love ourselves no matter what happens next, right? Decide what else to offer beyond the MRI, knowing that can't be the only thing that we're doing in that room, treating myself and the patient with kindness, and learning from whatever happens next. Next slide, please. So some ways that can really set you up to make boundary setting a success. Because like I said, sometimes we feel like boundary setting has to be really rigid. And if you need some rigidity, that's fine. If you're like, listen, I'm going to set a timer, everyone gets 15 minutes. When the timer goes off, I'm out of here, end of story, right? Like, and if that works for you, that's great. But for a lot of us, having more like grounded, flexible boundaries that are still firm in protecting our peace, our values, our sense of self is important. And still reaching out across the patient encounter room and actually connecting with the patient and feeling that fulfilling sense of like connected relationship with them is helpful. So these next few slides are going to give you some concrete strategies so that you're able to set boundaries and feel connected with your patients at the same time. So the first is the 4 best time-saving questions. You absolutely all know them because we all learned them in residency. They're the FIFE questions. A lot of us forget about FIFE. We think, oh, the SUs are over, we don't need them anymore, and we sort of forget them and go back to our OPQRST and go back to like what we need to do. But the sooner you can ask those FIFE questions, feelings, ideas, functions, expectations, especially expectations at the start of the visit, the better you can understand how the rest of your encounter will go. And the better you can understand what boundaries, if any, need to be set. So, if you know right up front, hey, doc, I've got 10 requests for you today, and you have that right out front as your agenda setting right at the beginning of the session, that can feel like a lot. You're usually more resourced. You have plenty of time still to discuss, and you can say, hey, there's no way we're going to meet that many things. So I'm just letting you know right now up front, this is how many that we likely will be able to do today, and we'll have to book back for the rest. Versus if it's at the end and they're like, one more thing, that's when we can really feel depleted and feel like it's harder to say no. Next slide, please. Just a thought about boundaries in general. This is my favorite quote about boundaries. So boundaries are the distance at which I can love me and you simultaneously. So again, sometimes we bring up boundaries and it almost feels it's like, we've got to put up these cement walls to protect us from these patients that are coming all over us. And that can make sense. They're coming over the sides of the building and and that can feel really intense. But really, this is about getting back to a place where we can enjoy that therapeutic connection that we have with a patient, which is often why most of us went into family medicine, is we want to develop those relationships over time. So, a patient's coming in and I don't know, they're requesting an early refill on their opioids and you've already set a firm boundary around it. And it feels like if I say no, then I'm ruining the therapeutic relationship. But if we reframe it this way, having a boundary that we're able to hold and allow ourselves to practice with our own integrity so that now we're not like feeling resentful and feeling like angry and mad at the patient, we can say, hey, I hear you. I know that you want this thing, and what I have to offer is this other thing, or like, that's not on the menu for today. And the patient can feel all their feelings, and you can know that you are actually still, this is the way that you're offering care to them, is through the vehicle of setting that boundary with them. Next slide, please. And actually, like I just said, it slipped out accidentally because I literally say this all the time. I say this to my kids, this phrase that's not on the menu. I actually first heard in the context of like dietitians on the internet being like, how you can tell your kids that they're not going to have candy for dinner without shaming them for thinking, like, not trying to vilify candy, but just saying that you're not having candy at this meal. The phrase is, that's not on the menu. And I use the menu analogy a lot with my patients as a way of also making it less of a dichotomy of like yes or no. Like the patient comes in with the MRI, and if you're just like, no MRI, goodbye, right? But really, there's so much more going on. Why do they want the MRI? What kind of back pain are they having? So you can say, you know what, after I've assessed your concern, I've heard you're in pain, you're suffering, and you think the solution is an MRI. Here are the reasons I don't. And here's what I want to offer you instead. Here's the MRI is not on the menu from me today. When I look at this case, I don't agree that an MRI is going to be helpful. And here's what I want to offer to you on the menu. So it turns the no into a possible yes that actually will feel good for everyone. Also, for people who come in and they're like, I don't want this, I don't want that. I can recall a case of a patient coming in and they had a musculoskeletal concern. They weren't interested in medication. They weren't interested in physio. They weren't interested in a referral. And so I kind of went through like, okay, well, I actually like use my hands and say, here's the menu of options I have for you. These are the only things I can think of that would be helpful. Are you interested in any of them? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm so glad that you came in. I'm sorry that you're feeling in the suffering. And if you want any of the things that are on this menu, please come back to me. But, just being clear, like these are it's clear as kind, right? These are the things we have at our disposal. And they can feel any kind of way about it, but really that's what we have to offer. And that's how we offer loving care to our patients, is by being honest with them about what we can and cannot do. Next slide, please. So in summary, when we think about setting boundaries, really what we're talking about is the limits that we set for ourselves to keep our actions in integrity with our own values, including, the way we want to practice medicine, including the amount of medicine we want to practice. So setting boundaries around how much care feels good for us, honoring our body and mind's capacity and our calendar's capacity and making decisions based on that. All of that goes under our locus of control. We get to set those things for ourselves. The inhuman stories tell us that we're like evil or bad or selfish or a bad doctor if we do set those boundaries. And that's kind of society's problem, but it doesn't have to be ours individually. Actually, when we think about it, if we were trying to be our best professional selves, like asking yourself, what do you need to show up as your best professional self? Like, probably you need to be rested, you need to be resourced, you need to be connected to the kind of care that you want to offer. That's how you can offer it with integrity. So grounding yourself in the reasons why you want to practice in the way you want to practice and honoring that, you'll get a lot of messages, maybe from colleagues, maybe from patients, that makes you bad or evil or selfish or not a team player. But at its root, it's just not true. Like, you setting those boundaries allows you to offer authentic, compassionate care to others. And so that's my pitch for setting boundaries. I think the next slide is my last slide, if I'm recalling correctly. Yes. So that's sort of like, I guess, like my pitch for boundaries, but I think this is best applied like with real cases. So I'd love to hear from folks. I've got a couple things from our panelists here in the chat already, but I'd love to hear even from others who are zooming in. What are some boundary struggles you have? Because I think applying them to real life situations actually is like the most fruitful way to explore this.
Thanks so much, Joan. Maybe we'll take the slides down for a moment, Peter. And yeah, I mean, we have a number of attendees on, and I'm wondering maybe people are shy to share their boundary issues, because sometimes they can be the things that make us feel like we're not doing the job as well as we want to be. But yeah, Joan, interested in your thoughts. I mean, AJ and I put a couple of our concerns.
Yes.
Sometimes would love to hear your thoughts on those.
Yes, a common theme from both of you. So saying like meeting expectations, patient expectations is a struggle when they bring up a lot in an appointment, as well as patients having an unrealistic expectations, like given the limitations, and that becoming a boundary issue, right? So one of my favorite expressions is that expectations are opinions. So when you think about that framework I gave, expectations go in the thought bubble above the patient's head, which means they're outside of our control and therefore outside of our responsibility. It is actually none of our responsibilities to meet our patient's expectations. What? But like, right? Like, especially no matter what, like there has to be limits, of course. oh, it's so delightful when their expectation meets reality and what we are willing and able and capable to offer. And that just feels like a slam dunk when that happens. So great. But we all have examples of patients, like patients sometimes expect things that are literally like incompatible with science. Like they want to be cured of things that are impossible, right? And actually, we don't feel too much guilt about those. Like someone comes in and they have metastatic cancer and they're like, why can't you cure me? You feel sad for them, but not many of us feel guilty or feel like we have to somehow violate a boundary because it's just very clear that's outside of our domain. And so we can get just as clear. It feels more like a decision because we theoretically could just never sleep and try and like hold together this crumbling healthcare system with toothpicks and tape ourselves. But we can also make a decision to not do that, right? So if they're like, I need you to find me a specialist tomorrow, I guess theoretically we could like ruin our lives trying to do that for the person. But in the same way that we cannot cure someone's metastatic cancer, we could also say, I love you, but no, I hear what you're saying, and I actually totally connect with your reason why you want a specialist tomorrow. Let's explore that. It's because you're in pain. It's because you're terrified. I hear you, and I hear that concern. And this is what I am able to offer. And when they say, are you kidding me? I can't see a specialist for a year. I love connecting with patients over my frustrations with the healthcare system too. I wish statements are my favorite. I wish you could see a specialist tomorrow. Wouldn't that be amazing? I know waiting 12 months, isn't it absurd? Call your MPP or whatever, but really, it doesn't have to be something that comes between me and the patient. It's actually can be another avenue of connection with the patient, especially when I don't think one of my jobs is to like defend the healthcare system, because I also refuse for that to be one of my jobs. I'm not in charge of it. I'm not like, slagging it off on purpose in any way, but like, I'm going to share my honest opinion about how I wish it was better because it's clearly not working. So I hope that like, and coaching our admin to do the same and giving our admin permission to hang up the phone if they're getting yelled at, like some of that stuff can be really helpful as well. Okay, here. Sometimes I find patients will want to talk about their lists because they say it's too inconvenient to come back or that they can't get in right away to come back on the list and will need to wait. And so again, that's like, I hear you. And like, I think we are probably all like efficiency superstars and we like absolutely can like crush quite a bit in 15 minutes. Like I'm spraying that ward, I'm talking to them about their med and like we're doing plenty. And we all know internally when we're at our limit. And it's what happens when we violate that. And so a 15-minute appointment is 60 minutes, right? Like that's when we really burn ourselves out. So it's hard. We can say, I hear you. And this is the time we have today. We can, even a little brainstorm of like, so if you were hoping for more time, here are the ways you can book more time. If there's ways they can book more time, here are the ways that you can get aspects of this care dealt with in the meantime. I love some of this stuff probably needs blood work. So let's get some blood work and then we'll need time to see what, let's start a med and then come back and then deal with some of the rest of this. I think mostly people want to feel like their list is heard in some way. And if they're really grumpy and they really thought that, they could come to a 15-minute appointment and deal with like literally review of systems head to toe, it is useful both for yourself and for the patient for them to understand that that's like not how it works. And so the more we can stay consistent for ourselves, the more we also teach our patients what they can expect in the future. And if they really expect that and they don't like that you're not giving it to them, they can attempt to find someone else who would. I kind of hope they won't find too many people because I hope everyone's able to set this boundary. But I know primary care is a limited resource, but walk-in clinics exist, other things exist. So like, if they want their care elsewhere, they can get it, but you get to decide what you want to offer as care for you. That means that you're going to keep showing up every day to offer care to people. I say that a lot too. People are like, why don't you work this time? Or why don't you do it this way? Or why do you have a nurse practitioner helping you? And I'm like, this is the way I'm able to offer care in a way that's sustainable to me. So this is the way you're able to still have a family physician because this is how I am able to offer primary care. And so if that doesn't work, you help welcome to find someone else, but I am not going to extend my hours or extend what I do beyond what I'm doing now because I have learned that leads to burnout for me. And then that puts everyone at risk of me at some point not being your family doctor because I leave medicine. And I think people are aware that people are leaving medicine, right? Yeah, ASAP forms is an opinion. It's the insurance company's opinion. Like, there's no bomb ticking away on that money that's going to explode, right? There's like, and I understand like financial strain is real. Also, often patients can be invited to be empowered to have accountability over their own timelines and deadlines. So that way, insurance companies also have a lot to answer for this, the constraints and pressure they put on patients as well. But all of that is outside of our locus of control. And so actually the best way to get really in a routine of timely form completion is to not get on the urgency train. So setting up some amount of time each week that you focus on forms, so you have some sense of when that form could be completed, so you can offer some amount of a realistic timeline for it. That is useful. And if they're unhappy with that, they could take that form somewhere else, in theory, right? But like really, the best way to teach everyone in the system that forms are never an emergency is for none of us to treat them like an emergency. And emotional urgency versus medical urgency are two different things, and both are valid, but both have different treatments. If someone has emotional urgency, it's actually not necessarily in their best interest to run in and try and fix it. When someone has emotional urgency, we can say, I hear you, that's hard. We can validate their feelings. We don't have to be like, stop being upset. We're like, I know this is so hard. And here's the consistent boundary that we have to offer so that we can continue to provide you the service at all.
Great. Thanks so much, Joan, for really leading us through how we can manage like those tricky situations. And I actually really like that thought of emotional versus medical urgency, because I think we often are responding to emotional urgency rather than true medical urgency. Um,
Yes.
Given the time, I think we'll stop at this moment and turn things over to AJ. But first, a big thank you to you for joining us, and hopefully you can stay on in case there's any other questions towards the end of AJ's talk. And hopefully AJ is going to give us some ideas about how to, build some efficiency into our form work. So we'll turn things over now to AJ.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. College and Dr. Chan. I really enjoyed hearing your talk, Dr. Chan. Lots of wisdom there for sure. Especially that's not on the menu, and yeah, lots of great advice there. Perfect. So I'm going to talk about sort of available tools to address forms, referrals, and inbox management beyond AI scribing, because we know AI scribing is here, and that's addressing the charting problem, but there's more to it than that. So let's proceed to next slide, please. Our learning objectives. First, we're going to address some major sources of admin burden. We're going to breeze through that because it's known to all of us what those burdens are. We're going to explore those tools to address some of these issues about forms, referrals, and inbox, and some strategies to streamline our clinical operations. Okay, next slide. So in my second year of residency, I had this crazy idea, which was to build and start my own family medicine clinic. So on the picture on the left side, you see me there. This is after we purchased the commercial unit, and the spray paint on the floor actually demarcates the borders of the different exam rooms. The green is like the pharmacy. So anyways, long story short, after residency, we started the clinic. The picture on the right side, this was me and my wife, Mary, my co-founder. This was the night before we opened the clinic, and this was midnight. We just dusted off all the construction dust because the very next day I was seeing my first patient at the clinic. And over the years, I grew the team. We now have 4 doctors. We're caring for over 5,000 patients. And this is a really happy time. So I want to emphasize, I love family medicine. This is a super happy time. But you'll see as we're growing our practices, the paperwork problem grows too. So next slide. And you hear about this number of 19 hours per week. of admin time. And that's, to me, that's like super real. This is so true because we have endless forms. We're getting hammered with requests for referrals. We just heard about, requesting MRIs and all that stuff. We heard about forms, being asked for like ASAP to be filled. Our inbox is constantly overloaded with faxes, HRM, lab results, messages from pharmacies, from specialists, imaging, all that stuff. So we're constantly getting that volume of information coming to us. And AI scribes, again, super helpful for charting. If you haven't explored that, definitely worth exploring because that will save you a ton of time. But it doesn't address the whole problem of paperwork. So let's talk about a few things that we can try to do. So next slide, please. So the first case is addressing forms. And the way I want you to think about it is there's really two steps for forms. The first step is to getting the form ready for you. And what I mean by that is you should not be looking at a blank form and fill it out from scratch. The form should be filled out, patient information should be filled out. The patient has signed it to authorize you and dated it. It should be clear why that form is being requested, whether you've already talked to the patient about it or you've gathered details from your admin about why that form is being required. So these steps are super important because there's a lot of inefficiency and a lot of back and forth to actually get that form filled out. And what I recommend is optimize the tools that are available to you, whether it's stuff from the EMR with custom forms and so on. You can use secure links for pre-filled forms like Ocean e-request, for example, can be used. Templates. Essentially, by the time the form comes to you, it should be pre-filled with the patient information. Everything is written, authorized, right? And the form should be appropriately booked. So for example, if there's a physical exam needed, I shouldn't be looking at that form if unless the patient is in front of me so I can do the physical exam. The next step after that is to have some tools to actually speed up the completion process, right? And I think that's where AI can be handy. I'll mention, our company Pippen, but there are definitely other companies. So I'll mention other ones like Mutual and Scribeberry. They're providing solutions for filling out forms. What I do is after you've already talked to the patient, right, and you're already doing the AI scribe to document the encounter, you can actually have a follow-up question about that visit or that encounter. And so what I normally do is I would literally just review the chart and start saying what the questions are. So I'm talking about like a little bit more complex forms. So let's say disability tax credit forms, forms from insurance, like short-term disability forms and so on. They ask really detailed questions. So I would say, okay, question 1 is about this, and I would have my thoughts, just using natural language. I'd be looking at the chart and say, okay, this patient saw the specialist, they had this imaging done, this is what it showed. So I'm just talking about it naturally. And then I would let the AI actually draft the questions and answer responses. And that really helps with the completion of the form. We'll talk about that in more detail in the Q&A, but I'll just breeze through the other use cases. So let's go to the next slide. Next one is about referrals. So again, I want you to think about it as two main things. So first one is the actual submission process. And there's a lot of inefficiencies there, missing documentations, having to manually fax stuff, right? So first step is like the submission process. And again, what you want to do is optimize the available tools for you in the EMR. So for example, I use TeleSPA Suite, and I have like a template for referrals, which basically pulls in, thank you for seeing this, age, gender, patient, right? And And then it pulls in the allergies, medications, past medical history, right? And I have my stamp at the bottom with, my name and CPSO number and so on. And so really all I have to fill out is the reason for referral. And then of course, attach the relevant information. So that's like fax pathway. Of course, I have Ocean e-referral, and that pulls in some of that information automatically. So again, optimize what's available to you to automate some of these processes. And then AI and the new technology can again be handy here, right? So again, one of the for simple things, right? If you're sending a simple request for a referral, you're probably not going to need AI. But think about some of the complex cases you're seeing. It's a nuanced request for a referral. There are some details that you really want to highlight in the referral to hopefully speed up that process. And sometimes like you're talking to a patient about multiple issues, and like when you look back at it and you're like, okay, they wanted a referral, but what was it about? So there's a lot of inefficiencies that way. So AI can be helpful here to actually draft the reason for referral based on that encounter that you had. And really what you need is just the reason for referral to be drafted, and then you can verify and submit it. So that's step one, which is the submission process. Let's go to the next slide. And step two is like the management of it, right? So you're running into issues of rejections, redirecting referrals. And so the question is like, how do you manage that? And then there's also, request for second opinion, third, referral opinion. So this is where maybe you don't necessarily need technology necessarily, but having protocols and delegation and process, right? So for example, let's say you sent a referral and the specialist said, I can't see this patient in a timely manner, consider a referral to someone else. At that point, when you've already submitted the referral and all the details are there, there's really nothing medical for us to do, right? This can be delegated to your staff to say, you know what, I don't even necessarily need to see this. Just go and send it to the other dermatologist, right? And that can really get rid of that inbox for us, right? The other piece is about second opinion request. And as you know, specialists can decline those referrals. So I've learned this from one of my colleagues, which is, if you're getting a request for a second opinion, have a protocol. And so what she was doing is saying, you know what, I'll send a request for a second opinion. If they reject that one, it's going to be on you to call up other specialists and find out if they would accept a second opinion referral, right? Because it's just not fair for us to keep doing the same work because that patient wants a second opinion and a third opinion. And I thought that was helpful. That's a good compromise. I'm going to send a second request, but if it gets rejected, go and, help me with some of that work, right, as well. So anyways, different people have different aspects about how to manage, but these are just some suggestions. Ocean e-referral can be really helpful. So the benefit of Ocean e-referral is just to engage the patient in that process, right? There's nothing magical about that that software. It's just that it notifies patients that a referral is sent, referral is being triaged or accepted. Here's your appointment, right? So that alleviates some of the problems on our practices, right? Our front staff. And then it gets patients engaged in that process. So I think that's really helpful. If you don't have Ocean e-referral, one thing you can consider is to actually, if you're sending by fax, is to give the name of the specialist, the contact information, and honestly, just again, delegate that to the patient to follow up on. So I tell them, if you don't hear anything, about the appointment, this is the number of the specialist I'm sending the referral to. Just call that office after, let's say, 3 weeks, right? Give them some time. That way they're not calling your office. They're not, you're not getting another inbox message showing up that you have to assess. And then the other piece is batching referrals. The reason for batching, what I mean by batching referrals is you just save them for a time of the week and just do a whole bunch of them at the same time, right? So my referral day is Tuesdays, so I just do my referrals on Tuesdays. The reason for this is that you become kind of inefficient when you're jumping from topic to topic, right? So if you're seeing a patient, you're doing your diagnosis and treatment and counseling, then you switch to, okay, I got to renew a medication, to I got to fill out a form. Okay, now I got to send a referral. That is a recipe for inefficiency. And it's good to think about like how our colleagues in other specialties are efficient. Like you think about radiologists, they're sort of, for a period of time, they're just reviewing image after image after image, and they're just being super laser focused, super efficient, and that's how they can be really productive. And I think we can try to do that as well. Next slide, we're going to case number 3. So this is inbox management, big topic. So lots of thoughts about like, how to think about inbox. Again, 2 steps, right? Step 1 is the message gets to the EMR and it has to be routed to the right patient chart, tagged to the right doctor, categorized as the right category, right? And being all being done at the same time. A lot of us don't actually see that process. We're just kind of seeing it being tagged in the patient chart and, tagged to us. But there's, that process actually is very tedious, time consuming, cost a lot of money in terms of overhead. And, it often leads to delays, faxes are miscategorized and so on, or placed in the wrong chart. So there's a lot of problems there. But thankfully there is technology for this, which I'll touch on. Next slide, please. Now, once the faxes or the HRM has been categorized and put into your inbox, right? Now it needs our action, right? And we just need to obviously address the messages. There's a number of messages that truly need our attention, right? You think labs, imaging, prescription renewals, right? These are clinical things that we need to do, but there's going to be a whole bunch of other stuff that doesn't really need us, and this requires again, written protocols about delegation, right? So I mentioned referrals being redirected, that doesn't necessarily need us. So having thinking about rules in place to try to address that can be really helpful. I'll mention 2 AI companies that are addressing stage 1 of the problem. From what I know, Wave the Weight and Felix AI are trying to automate that process of correctly categorizing the message and putting it into the right chart, tagging the right doctor and the right category. So they're addressing stage 1. There's not many tools available that address stage 2 that actually help us with our sort of task, but hopefully that's coming. Yeah, and I'm really excited about all the AI companies out there that are trying to address this problem, because that will be super helpful. So let's go to next slide. Okay, so I want you to think about the ideal situation. Imagine if everything is automated, the time you spend is only on the medical questions and addressing clinical concerns. Forms are pre-filled, automated, all the information is ready for you, and you're just adding the pertinent clinical information. Referrals are pre-filled, ready to go. You just have to put in the reason for referral and everything is taken care of. Inbox is sorted. You're truly just focusing on the truly clinical items. Wouldn't this be nice? So unfortunately, we don't have that solution yet. But then the question is, how do we get there? So next slide. And how we get there right now, technology is not sufficient. We don't have anything that really get us there at this point by itself, by technology itself. So the closest thing we have is a combination of human factors and using technology, right? So the human factors are all the boring stuff that are so important, which is having written protocols, having training for our staff, educating patients, scheduling time, batching tasks, right? So this will probably, if you were to think about it from that way, you probably can get maybe 50% to even more, maybe 70% of the solution can be done by having these, these steps in place. And then the second piece is the technology. So for that, really, it's all about optimizing the built-in tools for the EMR, right? Whether it's custom forms and templates and reminders and toolbars and all that stuff that's already built in, and then adding hopefully some of the emerging AI technology to streamline some of these processes. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are take-home messages, right? We all know admin burden is real. AI Scribe's great as a starting point, so definitely explore those. But the real relief will come from addressing those other items, forms, referrals, and inbox. Next slide, please. So I'm almost there. So I just want to leave you with a challenge, which is I want you to think about your practice right now and what is giving you the most headaches, right? What is the one problem that you're struggling with in your practice that you wish can be solved, right? And I would say my challenge is to go out there and try to solve that, right? Think about those two, combination of things, human factors plus maybe technology, right? To put it together and see if you can solve it in your own sort of practice. So I think my last slide is just my contact information. I'd love to talk more. Yeah, please connect with me on LinkedIn. There's my emails there. If you have any questions, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, AJ, for certainly giving us lots to think about, both with respect to AI, but also recognizing that the technology hasn't quite caught up in all the ways. So we do also have to look at our human resources and how we're using them. Yeah. One question which I had, just as you were going through, you were talking about the filling in of forms when you were using AI Scribe. And I was just, if you could sort of explain how you would actually, you said you would talk through it yourself and then it would populate into the question and answers like a disability tax credit. How does that kind of work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so for example, like let's say you're talking to the patient, they're there for, let's say, depression. You're managing that conversation. You're already using the AI Scribe, and then they bring up CRA disability tax credit that they want to fill that out. So you could either right then and there ask questions about that form and talk to them, and then the AI Scribe will still capture that information. After the patient leave, you can actually say, help me fill out the CRA disability tax credit form. And it would just know these are the questions and it will pull in information from that conversation. Now, if you are not talking to the patient at the time you're filling out the form, you can actually begin an encounter using like the speech to text. So it will capture your voice and it will transcribe the information. And you're just sort of reviewing the chart, reviewing the questions and talking about how you would answer it right there and then. And it would actually, so I would just say like question one is about, okay, when did your patient start to have symptoms? What is the diagnosis? And I would just, talk about it, right, by reviewing the chart and pulling information from my last encounter. And then the AI Scribe will actually draft the answers for those questions. It's really remarkable how like that technology can be really accurate and helpful. And then, of course, you have to verify, make sure everything is accurate, right, from your end. Yeah.
Great. Thanks very much, AJ. I had one other question. I'm seeing if there's any in the Q&A, but I don't see any jumping in there, which was just around, you had mentioned for your inbox that you need to train your staff. And I think a lot of people on this call are just starting their practices. And I just wondered how you go, do you have some tips around how you trained your staff to, for example, I know at our office, my staff just puts everything into the inbox. So they're definitely not trained to sort things out or whatever. And I'm wondering if you have some tips, like what you've done at your own practice in terms of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like we as many clinics go through a turnover of staff, right? This is a tough job for our front staff. And so I found that every so often I'm training someone, do a lot of meetings with them and go over questions. And then, they inevitably leave, and then someone else comes, and I have to repeat the process. So eventually said, you know what, we're gonna just have a written protocol. So for all the things that we talk about that are really high yield, and that goes about, scheduling. So we have like rules of thumb for scheduling, for example, like length of appointment and so on. So we have a number of these tools. We have a protocol for like triaging appointments, and if like a patient is sort of not happy, it goes to boundaries, thinking about what can I do for them? Like, instead of saying I just don't have availability and then everyone is upset, saying, okay, like here are some ways that we can try to get you the support you need. So part of it is just having that written protocol up front, and then part of it is like talking to the staff, reiterating and like sort of revising that as time goes on. But that becomes really, really helpful because it puts everyone on the same page. Yeah, so absolutely, that's a helpful resource. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks very much, AJ. Just cognizant of the time. So as we're coming close to 8 o'clock, I just going to finish off with the last few slides. So maybe Peter, if you could just put up the slides again, that'd be fantastic. So just a reminder, we have 2 upcoming sessions, one in May, which is about, we've got a panel, a panel of people coming to talk about doing family medicine and something else, whether it be surgical assisting or addictions medicine. So please come listen to see how you can do a variety of things. And then in June, we'll be talking about wills and power of attorney. Next slide, please. This is our evaluation. Please fill it out. We really appreciate your thoughts and also your recommendations in terms of other topics that you want to hear about. I'll just leave that up for a second because so people can scan it, because we'd really appreciate that. But while it's up there, I want to say a big thank you to Dr. Kadhim and Dr. Chan. We really appreciate you coming today. I want, you gave up your time in the evening. You gave it up for free even. So we do appreciate you showing up and also just giving us some really important things to think about, both from a boundaries perspective and also in terms of office efficiency. So thank you to both of you. And we really appreciated you being here tonight.
Thank you.
And just wish everybody a very happy evening and enjoy the rest of it. And certainly reach out if you have any questions after the fact. I also wanted to just mention, actually, someone had popped it into the chat about Joan's podcast, which is excellent. She can't promote it, but I can. So, have a listen if you haven't already. And you can also check out AJ's Pippen AI Scribe. So thanks everybody for joining us this evening, and have a great rest of the evening.